Hello, my name is Philip Bloom and welcome to this, my review of the DJI Ronin-S. This is their first ever one grip, single grip, 3-axis gimbal. There's loads of other competitors out there. Let's have a look and see what DJI bring to the table. I've used 3-axis gimbals a lot over the past 4 or 5 years. My first one was the Freefly Movi M10, which was fantastic, and it really was the first professional filmmaking tool like that. But it was the smaller brother of that, the Movi M5, that I have used the most. I used it for CNN's The Wonderlist. I must have used it in probably almost 20 countries. And I got some fantastic stuff with it. I absolutely loved the results that I was getting. Although you've got to make sure with all of these gimbals is you don't overuse them. You use them for the right thing. The next one I got was the Lettuce Helix Junior, and I really like this. It's got a completely different style and design to all the others out there and was a joy to use. And then these one-arm gimbals started coming out, and I tried a couple of them but really didn't like anything that I was getting from them. It was a massive step down for me from the Movi and the Helix Junior. That changed when I got the Came TV Profit. Really like the Profit, and also really like the fact you could put a dual grip on it, and you could also put on a ring like I had with my Movi M5. And I really love the ring because you can hold it in loads of different places for comfort and getting extra height, and you can also set it down really easily. DJI's first handheld gimbal was the Ronin. I found it way too heavy. Then they brought out the Ronin-M, which solved a lot of the problems with that. It was way lighter. As you can see it here, sat next to the Ronin-S. It's obviously a lot bigger. This is a dual grip gimbal. Whilst it was lighter, you still had to use the stand. And the stand is a pain. You pick up the gimbal, normally it does have a camera on it, and you go get your shot and you have to put it back on the stand when you've done the shot. But if you're moving around, it means you have to carry that stand with you, and that's really not ideal. They did bring out a ring for that, so you could put it down as well, and I do love those rings. I've already talked about them. The Ronin-S actually has a tripod, mini tripod that you screw into the base, which means you can put it down. My first impressions, it's very well made, very solid, looks good, looks really good. Heavy, getting close to 2 kilos, and that's without the camera and lens. And I think a big part of that is down to the fact that this is a battery. This is all battery here, charged via USB. I expect they will bring out additional ones of these for you to buy and slot in, but it does last a good 12 hours, although it does need charging via the actual main unit. The motors are very powerful, and I think that is a big part of the weight in this. What is really nice is the position of the rear motor is low. Most of the other gimbals that I've used, the motor is up here, which means if you're trying to use a rear screen of a camera like this, you can't see it. Although to be fair, the rear screen on, say, the Sony's is not very good in daylight especially. So I do like to use an external monitor, and then you're going to find, or try and find a way to externally mount a monitor, and I'll show you how I do that in a minute. Really the big test is simply to go out and use it. So that's what I'm off to do. So I've come down to Allington Lock in Kent. I've dragged Sarah out of her Sunday bed to film her. So she's actually on the A7R III filming me, and I am on the A7 III. As I showed you, that 28mm f2 is a really lovely lens for this sort of thing. Nice and light. And the autofocus is fantastic. I will shoot manual focus lenses as well. This setup is heavy. I've added on this accessory arm, universal accessory arm, with the small HD focus OLED, and I have a small rig. So everything's small apart from this small rig monitor arm. So the autofocus I think should work really well. I've got it all balanced. I've got the settings where I'm going to shoot 4K for normal speed, so you can see how smooth it is, and I am, because when you shoot at 50p and 100p, which I will do in HD, it is much more forgiving for any bumps. So it's time to get some shots, enjoy this, and mostly film Sarah in backlight because it looked a lot nicer than right now. I am back. I've done my first lot of filming, and I'm waiting for Percy to potentially come off the table. He's just knocking stuff off the table because that's what cats do. Hopefully he won't knock this stuff off, which is the Ronin-S broken down and the A7 III and a small HD focus OLED. Percy, hiya. You want to be in this? It won't get you in focus because the C200 is set to face detect, not feline face detect or feline bum detect. Come here. Oh my God, you're heavy. Percy here is actually heavier than the Ronin-S. And the Ronin-S, when it is set up, is heavy, especially if you set it up the way that I showed you when I went out filming additional bits. And holding anything for a long period of time is a bit exhausting, especially lovely Percy. Let me put you down. Oh, good boy. So, went through the footage. Very happy with what I got. I shot some slow-mo, I shot some normal speed. The normal speed is where you do tend to see if there's any, wobble, bounce or anything like that. I think I've got pretty good results actually. I'm pretty happy with it. So let me just go through the setup that I did have yesterday. The Ronin on its own, yeah, it does have that rear screen, but in that bright daylight, I really couldn't see it. And it does depend on the camera, but none of them are really, really bright. The Sonys are definitely not that bright. So I need to see what I'm shooting. So this is the Simply Gimbal Universal arm bracket thing, whatever you want to call it. So it's got the quarter 20 out on there, which has got a quarter 20 on the bottom as well to take the screw of the feet. Hi Purse. We put this in, and then we screw the battery grip thingy on. Nice and tight. There we go. So this arm I can put on the monitor. I do need to put the gimbal on as well. Excuse the planes, I am in the flight path. I am not going to stop between planes because they're like every 45 seconds and it's like 28 degrees outside and that's centigrade. It's quite hot, especially for England. And so I am sweltering a bit in here. So monitor on here. This is an arm from Small Rig. So that's a pretty good setup. We put the gimbal on and we lock it down, which is that way. Oh, in front of my face now. And then put the camera back on. Get it balanced again, because that's certainly not balanced right now. The arm on here, this doesn't affect the balance. It's anything that's on the camera, anything that's on this caddy, that's what will affect the balance. Anything that's off of the 3-axis gimbal isn't going to affect the balance at all. Okay, close enough. Okay, turn it on. Spins around, there we go. You are going to need a battery on the monitor, adds more weight. And this little flexi cable, which comes from Small HD themselves. This isn't the one that comes with your Sony bundle. That is a little bit too short. If you've got a cage or something, an HDMI protector, it is better. That will affect the weight and the balance. I turn it off. It's just a little cable, but it affects it. Don't worry too much, these motors are pretty good. The key thing is to get it balanced as good as you can get it. You don't have to fiddle too much to get it good. It's once you've done it a little bit, it becomes second nature. And you've got to be careful that the cable doesn't snag in any way. Have a look in selfie mode. Selfie mode, you can do this from a couple of clicks on a button. In fact, 3 clicks of the trigger. 1, 2, 3. Selfie mode. And to reset again is 2 clicks. Pretty good, isn't it? There's lots of shortcuts and different things. You find these out from reading the instruction manual. I know many of you will be watching this, specifically the male portion of the audience, as in 98% of you, will not read the instruction manual. Why would you? It's not like it actually comes with it in paper form. You have to actually go to the website and read it. Normally we just throw it out. But I do recommend it, especially if you've not used the gimbal before. Do read the manual, just don't tell anybody about it. And you can surprise your friends and colleagues when they're using their Ronin-S about these shortcuts, and they'll go, how on earth did you know that? And you can just say, I've worked it out. This is my bungees from Think Tank, and you've probably seen me wearing them a lot. They're not some sort of cabal, a wristband or anything like that. It's simply to tie cables down, and I've always got them on me because, apart from when I go to sleep or have a bath or shower, sometimes I do, I just attach it on here just to take off some of the excess. Go. Or anywhere that's not going to get in the way. This is the setup now. It is heavy, but I filmed for maybe an hour yesterday. Hour and a half of holding it. I'd put it down a couple of times, and it gets tiring. I mean, if you hold anything out in your hand for a while, you hold a pint of beer, just like that, you're going to get tired pretty quickly. Of course, one way of reducing the weight of a pint of beer is to transfer the weight from the glass into your body by drinking it. You can't do that with a gimbal, but let's see how long I can hold the gimbal. Go. No problem. I'm going to put my arm into my body to at least help me. This could take some time. That'll do. That's fairly substantial. Obviously, some people will find that heavier than others, but it is heavy. It is definitely one of the, if not the heaviest, one-handed, one-armed gimbal that I've used. The Zhiyun Crane 2 is quite heavy, but this is definitely heavier, and it's something you need to think about, especially if you are thinking about putting on a heavier camera, because the actual payload is 3.6 kilograms. And that actually means you can take a fairly large amount of cameras that are out there. I mean, the C200, which I'm filming on right now, could be on this gimbal, no problem. Even heavier cameras than that if you really wanted to, but you've got to keep within that payload. But in all my experience of using gimbals, you keep that weight down as much as you can. You're shaving everything off that you can. I do feel you're going to be better off with a bigger gimbal, a two-handed gimbal for starters, or one with a ring. If you are thinking about using a heavier camera like this, I think I would potentially, the biggest, heaviest camera I would use on this would be a Canon 1DX Mark II. That is a heavy camera for sure. It's a good couple of kilos, obviously more with a lens. I don't know exactly how heavy it is, but that is actually going to be quite hard on you. So I like the Sony cameras, the A7 series of cameras on here. It feels like a good weight ratio. Again, it depends on the lenses. This 28mm f2 is really light. The 16-35 f4 is a lens I've used a lot on gimbals. That is heavier, but not too bad. I don't know if anything's been announced yet. I certainly haven't seen anything about any dual grips coming out from DJI or a ring. If they don't, I'm sure third-party manufacturers are already working on it. The only thing I would say is if you have a third-party dual grip, then you're not going to have your hand on the actual controls. I'm assuming that if DJI bring one out, it's going to have a replicator of the controls on the side, because otherwise, you know, that's going to be a big disadvantage. I have seen some double grips which are 1/4-20, so you can attach it to the bottom of this. You could use those if you wanted to, but I'm hoping that DJI bring out a decent dual grip for it. The app that comes with it is very, very good and absolutely essential, because you have the ability to fine tune your settings, and you also have access to things like the motion control and time lapse, etc, etc, etc. So I'm just going to connect up. I'm not going to go through everything that the app does, because there's some fantastic reviews out there, videos where they've really gone in depth into every single setting. I want to keep this video relatively short, connect up to the Ronin. We have our settings here. The auto tune is definitely worth doing. I was going to show you the real basics that I 100% recommend using. Click on auto tune. It's going to grind away, and that is detecting the weight that is and the distribution of the weight on the actual gimbal and adjusting the motors for the best results. Doesn't take very long. So let's just check how good our balance is. Click on a balance test. A nice little movement there. There we go. Tilt, excellent. Roll, excellent. Pan, excellent. Excellent. So we have all these different settings in here, the different options. The configuration is for adjusting how well it reacts, and if you want it to react really fast to your movements, if there's a lot of action going on, or if it's really softened down. I kind of have it set to how I want it to right now. As I said, I'm not going to go into every single option. And you have the 3 presets on the back here, which are selectable from pressing the M button. So if you have like 3 settings that you use a lot but are quite different, then it's recommended to save them on there, and then you can switch between them quickly. We do have things on here which are very cool, which I haven't really used at all. I don't say I haven't really, I haven't used them at all. So we can capture an actual movement and repeat it, which would be nice for some motion control. We can do panoramas, which is really nice. I do a lot of panoramas. We can do time-lapse. You can set all your time-lapse settings here, which is really nice. And you can do motion time-lapse. So it's the same as the previous one, but added motion onto there. And track, which is used for things like hyperlapses and stuff. So lots of great functions for shooting time-lapses with the Ronin-S. The only real downside is none of them will work with my Sony cameras because the USB does not interface with Sony cameras right now. So we have in this little pouch here some USB cables. They're quite short because it just plugs into the end here and goes into your camera. This would fit the Sony's, but it doesn't matter because there's no control. In fact, if you put it in to the camera, it goes into USB mass storage mode, which is absolutely no good. The only way you can trigger the camera just for recording on the back is by using this IR blaster. So you plug this in there and then you point it at the IR. I don't bother. I'd rather just hit record on the actual gimbal. And that's actually one of the nice things about the motors, how strong they are, is they do resist your touch quite well. So for touch focus and stuff, you don't see the movement, which normally you get on gimbals. Every time you touch a camera, it affects it. So the only real camera that works perfectly at the moment with the USB are the Panasonic cameras, GH5, GH5S, etc. And I don't use them. I mean, I do have a GH5, I just don't use it. I don't use it for photography, and I don't use it for video. It's a very powerful, nice camera, but I don't use it. I much prefer the Sony's, and right now I cannot use any of the time-lapse features, which is a shame because I would really like to. And the stop-start is a basic function, and many other gimbals out there with a USB connection do enable that with the Sony's. So I'm hoping that they will add that in with firmware. Canon cameras right now, they do, I think you can stop and start, but you can't do everything right now. You do have on the side here a focus knob. When you are connected via USB, it will change the focus of any lens that is a native lens that has autofocus. Does that make sense? Even though you're not using autofocus, it needs the ability. It can't be a manual focus lens. It has to be a servo lens. And so the Panasonic Lumix lenses should work absolutely fine, but certainly not on this Sony cameras, not on Canon cameras. There is a compatibility list on the DJI website, and it shows you what's up and coming, and Sony doesn't show as up and coming at all. So if you do want to remote trigger the Sony, this is sort of an ideal workaround, but it is a workaround. This is from Fotka, and it plugs into your camera, and you can stop and start with it. You can also, if you have a servo lens, there's not many of them out there, like the 18 to 105 for example, you can zoom with this. And you could put it on here, you could bungee it down or something. It would be great if DJI could get the protocols, figure out how it can control the Sony camera. I don't know what the politics are involved, because I don't think it's necessarily a technological issue, because other manufacturers can make that work. So fingers crossed, something will be fixed there. It will also operate in wind speeds of it's like 75 kilometers an hour. So if you're in a convertible driving along with it, or, well, I don't know, in a speedboat for example, it wouldn't really deal with a helicopter well enough, but you know, it's pretty good in wind. Very strong motors for this gimbal. There's 3 main modes for operating. There's the standard upright mode. There is torchlight mode, holding the trigger. I'm going to stop it tilting. And there is the underslung mode. You've got to turn it the right way round. And there we go, tilt it up. So this is our low mode. You know, it's great for getting low shots really. And let's put it back to our correct way. Make sure we do it the right way round, which is this way. And we'll just double click the trigger to reset back to the start. If you want to do one of those spinny shots that you see many people doing reviews, which you probably won't use very much, you do need to program your gimbal to do that on one of your settings. So one of the joystick controls will, at the moment for my left and right, is set to pan. If I go to my third preset, I've programmed it to tilt. Now it won't tilt all the way because of the design. It means it's going to hit here, so you have to go into torch mode. There you go. I mean, it's pretty cool. I don't know how often you'll use it, but it's there if you want it. So that is my review of the Ronin-S. I think it's definitely one of the very best of the single-armed gimbals out there. It's hard to say whether it's the very, very best until I did some side-by-sides. And I'd like to do some comparisons with my Crane 2, because I think the Zhiyun Crane 2 is very good. But this is cheaper, and it's incredibly powerful in its functions. The main caveats for me, there's the weight. The weight, because of the battery and the motors, yeah, it does all add up, and I think it's a lot, especially if you are going to add on a bigger setup with a camera. But for me, it's just quite a small setup. There are ways around it, and I have been told that DJI are bringing out a dual grip. I had that confirmed this morning. I don't know when it's coming out. In the meantime, I do have this. I showed you what I had with the Simply gimbal arm. This is something from Zhiyun actually, and you can put a monitor on here and it does give you nice dual grip, and it was really cheap. It was like £35. The other caveat is, to get the full potential from it right now, you have to use a Panasonic camera. And look, I'm not gonna choose a camera specifically because it works better with this. I'm gonna use the camera that I use, and that is the Sony cameras. And right now they do not interface with it. The protocols aren't there. But I have been told they are working on it. They're trying to do things by the book. And so they're talking directly with Sony to get all of that proper communication protocol working. I have been told that hopefully by next month, we'll at least have stop and start working for triggering. And hopefully the ability to change focus will come after that. Until then, you have to stop and start it manually, or use that little dongle thing that I showed you. I really like the app. I think the app is a really strong part of the package. Although, in my experience, Android versions haven't been anywhere near as good for drones as iOS. I use iOS, so I don't know how good the Android app is, but the iOS app is very good. But the most important thing by far is it steady? How well does it perform when using it? And from my limited use of it, I am really impressed. I think it's terrific. It's managed to stabilize some quite, not perfect movement from me. And on longer lenses, I have only used up to 55 at this point, but normally I would shy away from using lenses of that focal length and keep it wider, sort of like the 28 that we have on here. So fingers crossed, firmware will come out soon to support all your wonderful cameras out there to fully unlock the features of this gimbal. The one thing that can't be fixed with firmware is that weight. In fact, it's going to get heavier if you add on the double grip, but then again, it will make it easier to use. If you are just going to use the one-handed system, then, well, I think if you're a single guy, you've probably got that strength already. The rest of us might need to head down to the gym and build up some strength in our right arm, or left arm if you're left-handed. Alternatively, just eat some spinach.